I woke up to the sharp scent of something metallic and bitter, like rust and cold air. My head felt lighter wrong. When I reached up, my fingers brushed uneven ends where my hair should have been. The mirror didn't lie. My waist-length chestnut hair, the one thing I'd cared for through every heartbreak, was hacked into jagged clumps. On my dresser lay my mother's craft scissors and a yellow sticky note that read, "You'll still look fine. Focus on your speech for Hannah's big day." The words blurred as my throat tightened. I wasn't robbed. I wasn't dreaming. My parents had done this while I slept. Before that morning, my life was quiet in the way survival often is. I lived in a small but sunlit apartment 2 cities away from my parents' house, just enough distance to breathe. The walls were painted cream, the kind of color that didn't draw attention, and my plants, 3 ferns and a stubborn orchid, were my proudest roommates. Most days began the same. I'd wake up early, make coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and listen to the hum of traffic below. The world outside always seemed a little louder than mine, but I liked that. I liked watching other people hurry somewhere important while I slowly pieced my life together, one quiet morning at a time. I worked as a junior speechwriter for a local nonprofit that helped women restart their lives after domestic or financial abuse. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Words had always been my safe space, careful, sharp, and controllable. Growing up, when my mother's voice rose or my father's sighs turned to lectures, I would retreat into my notebook, rewriting what I wished had been said. Maybe that's why I loved my job. I got to turn people's pain into power. At work, no one knew much about my family. They just thought I was a little too private, a little too hesitant at office parties. My manager, Claire, once said, "You write like someone who's seen the world and doesn't trust it yet." She was right. The truth was, trust was a luxury in my house growing up. Hannah, my older sister by 3 years, was the family jewel. Blonde, soft-spoken, always in the spotlight. When we were kids, she'd play piano at recitals while I held her bouquet. Mom used to say, "You two are so different. Hannah shines. You hold the light for her." I used to think that was poetic. Later, I realized it meant stay behind her. When I moved out at 19, it wasn't rebellion, it was oxygen. I took whatever jobs I could find, waitressing, tutoring, editing, to pay rent and tuition. No one congratulated me when I graduated college. No one came to the ceremony. Mom said it clashed with Hannah's engagement party. Still, when the wedding invitation came, I said yes. I thought maybe after years of silence, this was a chance to start over. I spent weeks saving for a navy silk dress I'd seen on clearance. Nothing too flashy, just something that felt like mine. I even wrote Hannah's toast carefully, keeping it warm and kind, even when I didn't feel it. I told myself this was what forgiveness looked like, showing up even when no one asks you to. The night before the wedding, I stayed at my parents' house because Mom said it would be easier for everyone. I should have known. That night, she handed me chamomile tea and said, "You must be tired, sweetheart. Tomorrow's a big day." I remember the faint bitterness in the tea but thought nothing of it. Now, standing in front of the mirror the next morning, seeing the evidence of their cruelty scattered on my pillow and floor, I realized something simple and horrifying. They didn't just want me smaller. They wanted me invisible. My chest ached. My hands trembled. I looked like someone halfway between a daughter and a warning sign. But I wasn't going to disappear. Not this time. I wish I could say that morning was the first time my parents hurt me. But it wasn't. It was just the first time they left proof. Growing up, love in our house came with comparison. My mother believed affection was currency, and Hannah earned it in abundance. I remember being 8, standing in the hallway in my faded uniform, holding up a drawing of a garden I'd made for school. Hannah was across the room, playing her violin. Mom didn't even look at my paper. "Don't interrupt your sister when she's practicing," she snapped. That same day, Dad said Hannah had the kind of beauty that stops a room. He looked at me for a moment, then said, "You'll have to rely on your brains." It wasn't meant cruelly, but it stuck like a stain I couldn't wash out. That was my first lesson. Love had a hierarchy. When we hit our teenage years, the gap widened. Hannah got braces and a photo shoot for her 16th birthday. I got a lecture about being too loud and too opinionated for boys to like me. She wore silk. I wore clearance rack. Every compliment I got seemed to offend someone. I started cutting my own hair back then. Cheap trims in the bathroom mirror, because I didn't want to ask Mom for help anymore. But one summer when I was 16, I let it grow long, chestnut brown and thick, the only part of me I felt proud of. I still remember the day she commented on it. "You should really cut that hair, darling," Mom said, folding laundry. "It draws too much attention away from your sister." "She's not even here," I said quietly. Mom's eyes sharpened. "Exactly. That was the day I stopped believing her cruelty was accidental. When Hannah got into college, there was a family dinner to celebrate. When I got accepted 2 years later, with a scholarship no less, Dad said, 'That's great. Maybe one day you'll catch up to your sister.' I moved out that same summer. The air outside their house felt cleaner than it ever had inside. But cutting ties is never that simple. They still called, mostly when they needed something. Write a toast for your sister's engagement. Fix Hannah's resume. Help her with the speech for her interview. I always said yes because saying no still made me feel guilty. So when Mom called me about the wedding, her voice sugary sweet, saying, 'We'd love for you to say a few words at the reception,' I didn't hesitate. Maybe I wanted their approval more than I admitted. The week before the wedding, she started making little comments again. 'Try something simple for your makeup. Maybe don't wear heels that high. That dress is lovely, but the color might outshine Hannah's palette.' I laughed them off. I'd heard them all before. Then came the tea. That last night the house was too quiet. My parents went to bed early, saying they were exhausted from wedding prep. I stayed up in the guest room scrolling through old photos, trying to convince myself that the next day would be peaceful. I remember feeling oddly dizzy, the edges of my thoughts blurring before I drifted off. And then morning. The uneven ends of my hair. The sticky note. The scissors. My parents' calm voices in the kitchen. "Less hair makes your face look less distracting," Dad said. "It's Hannah's day," Mom added, sipping her coffee. They spoke like they were discussing the weather, not the fact that they had drugged and humiliated me in my sleep. That was the betrayal that finally broke something in me, not just because they'd cut my hair, but because they didn't even think it was wrong. I remember standing there holding a handful of the chopped strands. They smelled faintly of shampoo and something metallic. My reflection looked like a stranger. My mother looked up then, eyes narrowing. "Stop being dramatic. It'll grow back." I wanted to scream, to ask why, but instead I walked out. Slowly, quietly, the way someone leaves a house on fire. Not running, not looking back, just stepping into the smoke and hoping it doesn't follow. When I got home, I sat on my floor, shaking. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Don't make a scene tomorrow. Hannah deserves peace." That text was the match that lit everything. I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I picked up my phone and called Becca. She answered on the first ring. "What happened?" "They cut my hair," I whispered. "While I slept." Silence. Then, "What?" Her voice cracked. "Who your parents?" I didn't reply. I didn't have to. She was at my apartment within an hour. I opened the door and for the first time in years I cried like a child. She sat beside me holding my hand, whispering, "You don't deserve this. You never did." That night, as we sat surrounded by fallen strands of hair in disbelief, she said something that stayed with me. "You've spent your whole life trying to make them see you. Maybe it's time to make the world see them." And just like that, something shifted. The ache didn't vanish, but it turned into something sharper, clearer. Not anger. Not yet. But resolve. The morning of the wedding arrived wrapped in sunshine that felt almost mocking. The world was glowing, soft gold light on the curtains, birds chirping like the day itself had something to celebrate. I didn't. Becca stood beside me, straightening the hem of my navy silk dress. She'd evened out my hair the night before, shaping the uneven mess into a sharp chin-length bob. The mirror showed someone unfamiliar. Not broken but stripped down. Raw. Honest. "You look incredible," she said. "Like someone who's done pretending." I managed a small smile. That's the idea. On the way to the venue, my phone buzzed with messages from Mom. "Mom. Where are you? Mom. Don't be late for pictures. Mom. And please remember to keep your speech kind. No surprises today." I turned the screen face down. The venue was a vineyard just outside town. Acres of green hills and white tents draped with fairy lights. The kind of place that photographs beautifully. Exactly Hannah's style. When I stepped out of the car, a light breeze brushed my bare neck. For a moment I almost laughed at the irony. The same wind that made Hannah's hair dance would only remind everyone mine was gone. Inside, the air smelled of roses and champagne. Laughter spilled from every corner. Polite, practiced laughter that sounded rehearsed. I found Mom near the buffet, directing florists like a general on a battlefield. When she saw me, her smile flickered. "Oh good, you made it," she said, scanning me head to toe. "At least Becca fixed that disaster." I stared at her. "You mean the disaster you caused?" Her expression hardened. "Watch your tone. This isn't about you." "It never is," I murmured. Before she could reply, Hannah appeared, radiant in lace and light. She looked beautiful, she always did. She hugged me lightly, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "You look different," she said, her voice hesitant. "Did you decide to cut it?" I almost laughed. "Something like that." She tilted her head. "Well, it suits you. Kind of edgy." There was no malice in her tone, just cluelessness. That was always Hannah's secret power. She could float above the wreckage without realizing she was standing on it. As the ceremony began, I sat quietly among relatives who barely remembered my name. My parents sat in the front row, smiling as if nothing had happened. When Dad took Hannah's arm to walk her down the aisle, his face glowed with pride. A face I'd never seen turned toward me. I wanted to hate her, to hate all of them. But mostly I felt hollow. After the vows, after the photos, came the rehearsal brunch. The one where I was supposed to speak. Becca squeezed my hand under the table. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. "If I don't speak now, I'll never stop being their ghost." When Mom announced me, her smile was sugar-coated steel. "Our younger daughter will now say a few words for her sister." The microphone felt heavier than it should have. My heart was a drum in my throat. I glanced at the crowd, family, friends, co-workers, all the people who thought we were a perfect family. My mother's smug expression dared me to behave. I started with the safe script, the one she'd approved. Hannah and I grew up side by side, learning what it means to love, to share, and to celebrate each other. Then I paused. Something inside me cracked. "No," I said softly into the mic, "that's not true." The room went still. Forks froze midair. I could feel my mother's glare. "What are you doing?" she hissed. I ignored her. Growing up, I learned a lot from my family. I learned that silence can look like peace. That control can wear a smile. That sometimes the people who tell you to let your sister shine are the ones who steal your light in the dark. A murmur spread through the guests. I continued, voice trembling but steady. "Last night, my parents cut my hair while I slept. They said it was to make me less distracting." Gasps. Whispers. Someone dropped a glass. My mother stood abruptly. "That's enough." I looked at her, really looked. Her face was red, panic flickering behind her practiced calm. "It's not enough," I said. "Not after years of being told to shrink so someone else could feel bigger. Not after being drugged in my parents' house so I wouldn't look too pretty in pictures." The silence that followed was thunderous. Hannah's lips parted. "Mom, Dad, is that true?" Mom's voice cracked. "She's making it up." "Am I?" I said, pulling my phone from my purse. "Because I have recordings. Of your words. The things you said about me, about her. About how girls like me ruin weddings with jealousy." Her face drained of color. The crowd shifted uneasily. Hannah stepped back from them, eyes wide. I placed the mic down gently. "I'm not here to ruin your day, Hannah. I'm here to stop letting them ruin mine." Then I walked out. Outside, the sun hit my face like a spotlight. My hands were shaking, but they were free. Behind me, voices rose, confused, angry, afraid. But I didn't turn around. I just kept walking toward the car where Becca waited, engine running, eyes glistening. "You did it," she whispered. "Not yet," I said, looking back one last time at the white tents on the hill. That was just the first truth. The car ride back from the vineyard was silent except for the low hum of the engine and the faint clatter of Becca's rings against the steering wheel. I stared out the window, watching the landscape blur. Gold hills melting into gray city streets. The adrenaline that had kept me upright at the wedding was fading fast, leaving behind a hollow ache. I had done it. I had told the truth in front of everyone. And yet, instead of feeling free, I felt weightless. Like a balloon cut loose, unsure if I was rising or falling. Becca reached over and placed a hand on my knee. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know." She didn't push. Just drove. When we reached my apartment, the silence followed me in like a shadow. The air felt too still, too sharp. I could still hear the echo of my mother's voice. "She's making it up," ringing in my head like a verdict. I sank onto the couch, clutching my phone. Notifications flooded the screen. Missed calls from my parents. Dozens of texts from family. Some angry. Some shocked. Some quietly supportive. But one message stood out, from an unknown number. Unknown. "I was at the wedding. What you said took guts. You're not alone." I didn't know who it was, but the words steadied me more than anything else that night. Becca came out of the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. "You started something back there," she said, sitting beside me. "They can't bury it now. People heard you." I stared into the steam. What if I just made everything worse? For Hannah, for me. "You told the truth," she said simply. "If that ruins them, that's on them, not you." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe truth was enough. But I knew my parents, they didn't lose quietly. That night, as the city lights flickered through the blinds, I opened my laptop. Curiosity, anger, and fear mixed inside me like wildfire. I searched my name. Then Hannah's wedding. Then speech. It was already online. Someone had filmed the whole thing. My trembling voice, my mother's outburst, my father's silence. The clip had over 20,000 views in 6 hours. My heart hammered. The caption read, "Bridesmaid exposes parents' cruelty during sister's wedding. You won't believe why they cut her hair." The comments were a storm: disbelief, empathy, outrage. Who does that to their own daughter? She's so brave. Her mom looks like she's more worried about appearances than her kids. I scrolled through hundreds, maybe thousands of responses. Each one felt like a pulse of electricity, feeding something deep inside me. Not revenge exactly, but recognition. For years, my voice had been a whisper. Now it was echoing in rooms I'd never entered. Becca leaned over my shoulder. "It's going viral," she murmured. "You need to decide what to do next." I stared at the screen. What if this is it? What if I finally stop pretending and tell everything? Not just about the hair, but about all of it. She nodded slowly. "Then we do it carefully. Truth isn't revenge. It's justice if you aim it right." Those words stayed with me long after she left. By midnight, my phone buzzed again, this time with an email. Subject: Interview request, Real Truth Channel. They wanted me to share my story. Live. Unfiltered. For the first time in years, I hesitated, not from fear but from power. The girl who used to shrink in family photos now had the world's eyes on her. I walked to the mirror. The short hair framed my face differently now, sharper, bolder. It no longer felt like loss. Felt like armor. I whispered to my reflection. They thought they could silence me. They just gave me a microphone. I spent the next day writing everything: memories, conversations, screenshots, old messages, every small cruelty disguised as love. Not to destroy them, but to show the truth beneath the family portrait. Every word I typed felt like reclaiming something they'd stolen. My voice, my image, my story. And yet, somewhere in the back of my mind, a part of me still ached for them, for the parents I'd wanted them to be. But pain no longer softened me. It sharpened me. I didn't want vengeance soaked in blood or screams. I wanted the kind that burned quietly, the kind that left truth standing in the ruins of lies. When the interview day came, I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to Hannah's wedding. No makeup. No apologies. The host asked gently, "Why speak out now?" I looked into the camera, voice steady. "Because silence is how cruelty survives," I said. "And because sometimes the only way to heal is to let the world see what was hidden." The first 48 hours after the interview were chaos. My inbox flooded: journalists, podcasts, influencers, even strangers from other countries. Some wanted to help me tell my story. Others just wanted the clicks. But among all the noise, one message stood out. Subject: We believe you. Let's document this properly. It was from a small independent filmmaker, a woman named Elise, who made documentaries about family manipulation and psychological abuse. Her email wasn't flashy. No fake sympathy. Just sincerity. "If you're willing, we'll help you tell it truthfully. Not for pity, but for awareness." I read it twice before replying. Yes, but on my terms. Filming began quietly, just me, Becca, and Elisa's small crew in my apartment. They didn't ask for dramatics. They let me speak. The camera hummed softly as I told everything. The favoritism, the little humiliations disguised as jokes, the quiet dinners where Hannah's achievements filled every breath. I showed them photos, Hannah in designer gowns, me in hand-me-downs. Birthday cards where my name was spelled wrong. The sticky note that started it all. Elise sat behind the lens, eyes wet but steady. "You're brave," she whispered once. I shook my head. "I'm just done being silent." When the short documentary Cutting Ties was released, it wasn't explosive. It was quiet, raw, and devastatingly honest. No loud music. No editing tricks. Just my voice, shaky at first, then strong, layered over home videos of 2 daughters, one adored, one overlooked. It spread like wildfire again, but this time it burned deeper. Comments poured in from people who'd lived the same invisible wounds. "This is my family too. I thought I was crazy for feeling this way. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." The world didn't just see my parents' cruelty. It saw a pattern. The culture of favoritism. The silent competition between siblings that parents deny but feed. My parents went silent for a week. Then came the statement. A Facebook post, carefully written, polished by some PR friend, dripping with self-pity. "We are heartbroken by the lies our daughter has spread. We have always loved both our girls equally. We hope she gets the help she clearly needs." I read it over and over, feeling the familiar sting. That twist of guilt they'd always used like a leash. But this time I didn't bend. Instead, I opened my laptop and posted a reply. No anger, no screaming, just screenshots. Photos of text messages where my mother criticized my looks before family events. A clip from my therapy journal dated years ago, describing the same pattern of favoritism. A recording of my father saying, "You'll understand when you have a real sister like Hannah." Each one was a truth they couldn't polish or deny. The post exploded. People compared their statement to my receipts and saw the manipulation clearly. Suddenly, public sympathy shifted. Commenters began calling out the parents' gaslighting. Even Hannah's fiancé's family distanced themselves, deleting wedding photos that featured them. For once, I didn't feel triumphant. Just calm. Because I didn't need them to hurt. I just needed the truth to stand. A week later, my mother called. Unknown number. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Then she called again. And again. Finally, I picked up. Her voice was brittle, almost unfamiliar. "You've destroyed this family," she said. "No, Mom," I said quietly. "You did. I just stopped pretending." She tried to regain control, her tone sharpening. "Do you know what people are saying about us? Do you know what you've done to Hannah?" I swallowed hard. "Yes. For the first time, people are seeing what you did to me." There was a long silence. I could almost hear her breathing quicken. Then she said the words that once would have broken me. "You were always jealous of your sister." I didn't cry this time. I just sighed. "Maybe. But you made sure of it." And I hung up. Becca, sitting beside me, exhaled slowly. "That felt good." "Not good," I said. "Just final." The next few weeks were a blur of movement and stillness. I was invited to speak at a small women's conference about emotional abuse. It wasn't glamorous. No bright lights, just a modest room filled with people who understood. I stood at the podium, hands trembling slightly, and looked at their faces, strangers but somehow family. "I thought revenge meant hurting them," I said softly. "But it's not. It's reclaiming the parts they tried to take. Your confidence, your story, your peace." Afterward, a woman in her 60s hugged me and whispered, "I cut my hair short yesterday too. After watching your video, I wanted to feel new again." For the first time, I smiled without guilt. Then came the final test. Hannah reached out. A message that read, "Can we talk?" Alone. We met at a quiet cafe near the park where we used to play as kids. She looked tired, not glamorous, not glowing. Just human. "I didn't know they did that to you," she said, voice cracking. "I mean, I knew they favored me, but I didn't know it was this bad." I studied her face. The same softness, the same eyes that had once been a mirror of what I could never be. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just stopped needing their approval." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm sorry. For once she meant it. I could tell. We sat there for an hour, sharing stories we'd both buried. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, it was recognition. When she left, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "You look beautiful, by the way. Short hair suits you." It wasn't the apology I thought I needed. It was better. That night I looked through old photos again. There was one from childhood, me and Hannah on the porch, both with short hair after a summer haircut. We were laughing, faces smudged with ice cream. I realized I wasn't trying to reclaim the past anymore. I was rewriting it one truth at a time. I closed the laptop and whispered to the empty room. They cut my hair to make me smaller. But all they did was show me how to grow without them. The quiet filled with something new. Not pain, not anger. Peace. The screening took place in a small downtown theater that smelled faintly of popcorn and rain. Rows of mismatched seats. Soft murmurs before the lights dimmed. No red carpet, no photographers. Just people who'd seen the documentary online and wanted to meet the girl whose parents had tried to dim her light. Elise had called it the uncut version, a follow-up to Cutting Ties. This one wasn't about exposure. It was about what came after. When I stepped onto the small stage after the film ended, applause filled the room. It wasn't loud or chaotic, it was warm, human. People weren't clapping for a scandal. They were clapping for survival. I took the microphone, hand steady this time. The same microphone I'd once been too afraid to hold at my sister's wedding. "Thank you for coming," I began softly. My voice echoed faintly against the walls, but I didn't flinch. A year ago, I stood behind a podium at a vineyard, terrified and shaking. I was supposed to give a speech about love and family. But that day I realized, love doesn't cut your hair while you sleep. It doesn't tell you to shrink so someone else can shine. There was a murmur in the crowd, quiet, sympathetic. I smiled faintly. I used to think revenge meant making them hurt the way they hurt me. But I've learned it's something quieter. Revenge is living a life so honest they can't rewrite it. It's walking through the same rooms that used to make you small, and realizing you no longer need their permission to be seen. For a moment I could almost feel Becca watching from the back row. Her smile proud and tearful. Even Hannah had come, sitting near the aisle. Our eyes met briefly, and she nodded, small and sincere. I took a breath. People ask if I regret making everything public. I don't. Because silence protects no one. Silence just buries the truth until it starts to rot. A pause. And I was done rotting. Applause again, gentle but certain. I continued, voice stronger now. When my parents cut my hair, they thought they were cutting away something shallow, vanity, attention. But hair grows back. What doesn't grow back is trust. And once it's gone, all you can do is plant something new in its place. The screen behind me glowed with a still image from the film, the close-up of my uneven bob the morning after it happened. Then slowly it faded into another image, me months later, smiling freely under sunlight, my hair grown just long enough to move with the wind. I turned back to the crowd. If you've ever been made to feel small in your own home, I want you to know it's not your fault. You didn't imagine it. And you're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to tell the truth. Someone in the audience whispered, "Yes." And the sound trembled like a heartbeat through the room. I smiled, tears finally falling, but not from pain. From release. When the lights came up, people began to line up quietly, not for selfies or autographs, but to talk, to share. Stories of mothers who never said, "I love you." Of sisters who stole dreams, of fathers who looked away. Every voice was another shard of a broken mirror, reflecting pieces of the same wound. One woman, maybe in her 40s, took my hand. "My daughter showed me your first video," she said, eyes glistening. It made me call her. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. I squeezed her hand. "That's your revenge," I said softly. "You built something instead of breaking it." When the crowd finally thinned, Elise came up and handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a review from a small film journal. A story of quiet defiance. Proof that truth, when spoken clearly, can cut deeper than cruelty ever could. I read it once and tucked it into my coat pocket. I didn't need fame. I didn't need apology. Just truth uncut. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street lamps glowed against the wet pavement, and the city hummed with its ordinary life. I walked alone, no umbrella, the cool air brushing my face like a benediction. I paused at a shop window, my reflection looked back at me, calm, centered hair brushing just past my shoulders. For a moment I thought of that night, the scissors, the sticky note, the sound of betrayal, and how it led me here. Not a victim. Not a shadow. Just a woman who finally told her own story. I whispered to the glass, barely audible. They wanted me invisible. Instead, I became unforgettable. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. 3 months after the screening, I moved to a quieter neighborhood on the edge of town. Somewhere with wide sidewalks and old trees that looked like they'd been keeping secrets for decades. My new apartment had a small balcony, nothing fancy, but enough space for a table, a chair, and 3 pots of lavender that caught sunlight around noon. Every morning, I'd bring my coffee outside, let the air touch my face, and watch the city wake up below. No one here knew me as the girl from the viral video. They just knew me as Mira, the woman with short hair who smiled at the mailman and always carried notebooks. I liked that. I liked being ordinary again. The world had been loud for so long. After the documentary, the online storm had taken on a life of its own. Thousands of comments, interviews, podcasts, people projecting their own stories onto mine. It was overwhelming at first, the sympathy, the anger, the attention. But it also meant something real. People had seen what my parents had tried so hard to hide. Eventually, the noise quieted down. That's how storms always end. Not with a crash, but a hush. I'd stopped checking my messages every hour. Stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. Stopped needing everyone to understand. 'Cause now, I understood myself. One morning while sorting through mail, I found a letter with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Hannah and her husband, standing in a park with their baby boy. No note, just a date written on the back. For a long moment I just stared at it. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the wedding. Not once. They'd gone silent. Not out of shame but out of pride. Their version of the story was probably still the same. I'd overreacted, embarrassed the family, twisted everything for attention. But Hannah, she had reached out quietly. The photo felt like her way of saying, I see it now. I slipped it into a small wooden box that I kept on my bookshelf. The one labeled things I've let go of. Inside were old notes, a broken locket, my childhood ribbon, and now her photo. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing peace over proof. Later that week, I visited the nonprofit office where I used to work. Claire hugged me so tightly I almost cried. You should see the waiting list, she said, grinning. We've had dozens of women asking for writing workshops. Because of you. Because of me. Those 3 words landed softly, like a truth I was finally ready to accept. I'd started teaching part-time again. Classes on storytelling and healing through writing. The women who came weren't looking for fame. They just wanted to be heard. And every time one of them stood up to read something raw and trembling, I'd see a reflection of who I used to be, and who I'd become. One day after class, a young woman named Tara stayed behind. She fidgeted with her sleeve before saying, How did you forgive them? I mean, after everything. I thought about that for a long moment. The breeze from the open window carried the faint scent of rain and jasmine. I didn't, I said quietly. I forgave myself. For waiting so long to believe I deserved better. Tara nodded slowly, tears glimmering, and I realized, maybe that was the real ending all along. Not their punishment. My peace. That evening I took a walk to the river. The sun was low, turning the water gold. Families laughed nearby, dogs barked, the city breathed. I leaned against the railing and closed my eyes. The sound of the river was steady, patient, not rushing anywhere, just existing. I thought about my mother's words. Let her shine. Maybe she didn't know that I would. Just not the way she imagined. I smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. It had grown a little longer now, grazing my shoulders again, soft, uneven, alive. When I got home, I opened my laptop and began typing something new. Not another speech. Not a post. Just a story for me this time. Once there was a girl whose parents tried to make her smaller. But every time they cut her down, she grew differently. Stronger, quieter, but impossible to erase. I didn't need an audience anymore. I just needed to tell the truth, even if no one was listening. That night, I slept with the window open. The city hummed below, the lavender swayed gently. And for the first time in years, my dreams were peaceful. No scissors, no shadows, no fear. Just light. It's strange how silence changes over time. For years it was the sound of fear, of walking on eggshells, of holding my breath so I wouldn't say the wrong thing. Now silence means peace. It means I can sit in my own company and not feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night and touch my hair out of habit, half expecting the ghost of that morning, the metallic smell, the lightness around my neck. But it's gone now, like a storm that finally ran out of rain. The girl who stood crying in front of the mirror doesn't exist anymore. She became someone else, not hardened, just aware. Someone who knows that family can wound deeper than strangers, and healing sometimes means walking away without turning back. People online still ask, do you regret it? Making it public? The answer never changes. No, because the truth doesn't destroy families. It reveals the ones already broken. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't protect people from the consequences of what they've done to you. Not forever. You can love them and you can forgive them, but you can't keep hiding their cruelty just to seem kind. The lavender on my balcony has started to bloom. It's small and stubborn, leaning toward the light even on cloudy days. I water it every morning, watch how it keeps growing back no matter how many times I trim it. Maybe I'm the same. I've stopped seeing myself as the daughter who wasn't chosen, or the sister who didn't shine. Now I'm just a woman who told her story, and survived it. If you had told me years ago that my revenge would be this quiet, I wouldn't have believed you. But maybe this is what real revenge looks like, not rage, not noise, not destruction. Just peace. As the evening settles outside, I close my laptop, stretch, and let the air fill my lungs. The world is still turning. My hair brushes my shoulders. My heart feels light. They took my hair. But I grew back.